Ever notice how the church tells us to be perfect and then doesn't hold itself to the same standard? Let's talk about it. Hi, I'm Dwayne. Hi, I'm Daniel. This is Dwayne.
Yes, sir.
We grew up in church. Our families, our whole families, really. They're pastors, ministers, musicians, and leaders. We've seen the good, the bad, and the downright wild. And we're still figuring things out. I mean, everything all said and done, we're still just trying to figure it out.
Yep.
But what I know for sure is that we both still love God, but we've got some questions. This is the Spiritual Bros Podcast.
Spiritual Bros.
What's going on, Dwayne? Episode 1, are you excited?
Yeah.
One of these days we got to talk about how we tried to do this first episode the first time.
Yeah, it was crazy.
And it was just crazy. Everything. Talk about wild.
But, yeah. Oh, yeah. Because
just everything that could happen.
Things crashed.
Dude, everything crashed.
SD card wouldn't.
SD card crashed.
Yeah.
No cables went missing.
No cables.
We literally didn't have a microphone, so we used a pair of headphones as a microphone.
So unprofessional.
It was hard because
that's how life used to be back in the day. You had no microphone. You had to use a headphone.
Use a headphone. That's not even back in the day. It's just like a trick.
A couple weeks ago.
But then we got hit with the huge snowstorm because we're like, oh yeah, now we're ready, and then like all the roads are closed down.
Yeah.
Literally my first winter out here on the East Coast, and they were just like, guess what? All the roads is closed.
Yeah, so did y'all ever get snow like this?
No, in the West
Trash.
Coast, not even.
You hate it. You hate every
bro.
second of it, don't you?
Of the snow?
The snow, yeah.
No, it was kind of tight.
What? Crazy.
No,
I'm sick of it.
It was.
I'm sick of it,
Well,
man.
you've been on the East Coast for your whole life, no?
Yeah, I'm sick of it. I hate it.
Coming from the West, I'm like, the way you feel about snow is the way I feel about heat. Just heat,
I guess
heat
so.
and sand. I
I mean, here it can get really humid though.
Yeah, no, well, everything on the West Coast, well, depending on where you're at, is a large majority dry. So bro, that first summer was brutal. Anyway, we're getting off track.
Yeah, it's crazy.
We're getting off track. Welcome to the Spiritual Bros Podcast for sure. Episode 1. Excited to be here. We're talking about it for a minute. Today, I want to talk about. Today, we're going to talk about double standards.
Double standards.
Double standards for sure.
Yeah.
And double standards in the sense of like requiring one thing and demanding one thing and not doing the same thing in return or
right.
Like living up to the same standards that you set for somebody else. Literally the most basic definition of double standards. Being that I have a huge history with church on the leadership side, I've over time have gotten pretty frustrated, not just with the church, just with people of faith in general. And it's something that I've struggled with a lot because the church or people of faith have this habit of expecting perfection from people sitting in the chairs, members or your friends, but then giving a pass to people in leadership or giving yourself a pass for something you didn't really do yourself.
Right.
And they'll just like sweep it under the rug. And I'm not just talking about church. I'm talking about like even the family members to me that were like, oh, you got to do this, or I'm this kind of person, or you have to accept this kind of version. You have to do better. And they won't do it for themselves.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's hard because that double standard is so damaging. I know it's damaged me for a lot of the decisions that I make because, so for example, we all know pastors, ministers that are like, you need to protect your marriage or you need to be faithful to your wife 100% unequivocally because that's what is expected of you as a good husband. This is what expected of you as a good God-fearing man. Next thing you know, this pastor's got like 17 side chicks in a secret family.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, but I
was talking about you.
But I was talking about you. You got to do that. And you're just like, that's a bad look, bro.
Yeah.
And I know, like, I have musicians in my family. I know you had musicians in your family. And it's just like something about musicians that are just running around.
Oh, yeah, they get wild.
But I mean, it's just everybody in general.
Yeah, I mean, technically, I'm a musician.
I mean, me too. I'm the sound guy.
okay.
I'll play with Sam's.
Oh, okay.
No, I don't consider myself a musician.
Yeah.
But it's just one of those things, like those double standards. And I know from at least the leadership side of things, it's like sometimes the more vital your position is perceived, like in church or in faith, the more you can get away with.
Yeah, well, so it's wild too, because I know a drummer that travels to different churches to literally plays drums, but even though he plays drums at churches, I don't think he has like the full like engulf like Christianity or anything like that.
He's not in the faith.
Yeah, he's not in the faith. He's just a musician, so he's like, I'll just jam out, but I'm not really all about everything, even though I got to sit through it, which is kind of wild because it's like, how do you sit through it and not like receive any kind of thing? But I guess if your mind is somewhere else, double-minded, and if your mind is somewhere else, then it's just not going to take. But yeah, I mean, he's a wild dude.
Yeah, so it's funny because like in I know from a leadership aspect, especially when churches are small, they're starting out, and you're trying to figure out, what do we do? How do we improve our? Because again, well, not even again, just at the end of the day, a lot of time church can be treated like a business.
Well, yeah.
And from the business aspect of things, like when you're trying to fill in seats and get tithes and you're trying to get people to support the church, and eventually some of that money will become your income, like as a leader, like as a pastor. There's like ministers and pastors that have to survive off of that, live literally solely off the church.
Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing. It truly isn't. Like that's what's supposed to happen. Like
it becomes a bad thing when they start doing other things.
Yeah, and so the thing is, like, I remember there's a lot of times I know from even in our ministry when my parents were pastors, when my grandfather was pastors, you were prone to hire or contract some freelancers because they can come in, do it good, they can elevate your worship, they can elevate what you need, and they'll bring people in. That like most churches of that type are like, if we have good music, good word, people will come.
Yeah.
Good music, good word, and then people will come, people will tithe, and it'll be beneficial for everybody. Is that predatory? I don't necessarily think so, because you would want to give your best to God, and if that means you got to hire some people to do like graphics, to do like, even on my end, when I was gigging, I would do gigging for sound, I would do gigging for graphics, videography, for social media stuff. Gigging isn't a bad thing, but I think when you get sucked into too much of the business side of things and you start treating it like what it's not supposed to be treated like, this is where that double standard thing slips in. Because again, going back to like not just drummers, but I know like videographers, I know just like freelancers that have come to the church for the check. Yeah. And again, that's not a bad thing. Do what you need to do to make your money. Right. But it's not the same for you, because then that double standard becomes blurry, because now you got old dude hitting on what's her name, after church, and they're like posted up doing the classic, I like to call that high school fender lean, where they're just like shit around the car. They're like, yeah, what's up, girl? Yeah. And you're just like, hey, wasn't this dude
all right.
Yeah. And you're just like, hey, wasn't this dude just like shredding in the name of the Lord like 20 minutes, like an hour and a half ago or whatever?
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you do that? But like, see, something like that, I understand, because that's one of those things, like, there's where that double standard becomes tricky, because it's like, do you make the move to provide a better product, or do you make a move to have the proper standard set up all the way through? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but I guess
it's hard.
Yeah, it'll be hard, because it's like, if I'm freelancing, if I'm getting people like from freelancing or whatever, it's like, I don't expect them to have like the faith and walk in it, you know?
And that's, it's
and honestly be a member of the church.
That's hard. I know. So there's a couple musicians. A lot of musicians in churches are usually freelancers, sound guys, maybe tech guys, some, but mainly musicians. Not necessarily some singers. I know a lot of singers who gig, but it's mainly musicians, like your piano players, drummers.
Singers are different though. I feel like
it's like it's different, because usually all your vocalists are homegrown, or they're like very much in your congregation already.
Yeah.
So it's easier for them, not easier, but they tend to stay at wherever their church is at. But like drummers, basses, piano
And
players,
I think they're more faith driven because, I mean, they're singing the lyrics,
Yeah.
you know?
they have
So
to believe the lyrics.
yeah. And then sometimes they do. And it comes out and you're
brother,
like,
yeah.
all right.
Like, oh, I didn't know you out here in these streets
Yeah.
like that, bro.
Yeah. I was like, oh, no. So you the new preacher? Like
Oh,
what's
yeah,
going on here? I was
so
like,
are you-
okay.
okay.
Okay,
Oh, that's
okay.
another thing we got to talk about eventually. Of just like that power for the power of the limelight is crazy sometimes in church.
So annoying.
And you're just like, what are you doing, dude?
Yeah.
Like it's anyway, that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
But to kind of pull it back to that thing, it's just like the double standards. It's like when someone in position messes up, it kind of gets swept away. It's like, yeah, forget about that, but you have to do right. You have to do
Right.
perfect. And it's one of those things that I think about, like I think what is it, Matthew 23 talks about like when leaders won't work their load, basically. So what is it, Matthew 23 3 and 5, where Jesus kind of calls it out, and he was like, they tie up heavy cumbersome loads and they put them on other people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them. And it's crazy that in the word, Jesus is still calling this out. That's still happening today.
Yeah.
Of where people in church or of faith, because it's not just limited to churches. And I mean, I've been talking about family leaders, like,
Right.
and I know at least in Latino communities, brown communities, and I know for sure it's the same in black communities too. Black and brown communities, you have your community leaders or like people in your family that are leaders.
Yeah.
Like, like for example, we all got that aunt that will pray for us and go to war with us. So eventually you're going to go to her and just talk to just her directly.
Yeah.
You're like, hey aunt, I'm going through this thing. Pray for me. We all got our church mamas who aren't necessarily like preaching the word every Sunday or a minister, but
Right.
they're like trusted community people. And a lot of times their opinion or their whatever, like their opinion, their faith in you, like makes you judge yourself. And that's the hardest part because
Yeah.
when it gets weaponized, that's the problem. That's where that double standard comes in.
Yeah.
And it's exhausting trying to live up to that standard that these people are giving to you, but they themselves aren't living by. You know what I mean? Like I've had that family leader and that church, that like non-church leader in my life who was like, you need to do this, and you'll be all right. And they're out here doing the exact opposite. They're like, oh, you know what? I'm just a human too.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I'm just going through stuff. To pray for me.
Yeah.
And I was like, come on, bro. Like, it's not that hard to live. It is hard to live correctly, but it's just like you can't demand something from me and then come down on me for something you won't do. But the part that gets me is when it's automated. You do it to yourself before they ever have to say anything to you, and that's the hardest part.
Yeah, I think, well, again, that's the issue that it's just with Christians, because it's almost to a point where like they don't judge, but then they overjudge. And you're like, all right.
I like that thing where you have like the cool people's like, I don't judge, but you know what you should be doing.
I know, right? I'm like,
what?
straight
What?
judging, bro. Like, yeah. Like, well, what? Like, yeah.
It's like, the silence is loud, bro.
Yeah, yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's I mean, I'm going to talk about Matthew a lot. And I just want to put it out there that I'm not a pastor. I'm not a theologian. I'm not any of that. This takes a lot of reading and stuff that makes sense and in the word. Like I always remember like my dad just always telling me that, God's secret or God's secrets are in the word. You just got to look for them.
Yeah.
And the word will always make sense when it's applied to when I think about it in like real life situations. And again, I just want to talk about that real quick. We're not pastors. We don't got like churches. We're not telling you how to live. We just got questions and we know what the word says to a degree because we just have to investigate the stuff as we're going through it. So we're just trying to point out like stuff that we see and the stuff that we struggle with because this is a conversation. And again, I do want to make that very, very, very clear. The issues or the things that we have with like church or people of faith, we're just bringing it up because it's our way of not trying to feel guilty about the stuff anymore.
Yeah.
And trying to figure it out because it's not just church.
Don't come at us like, oh, not my church. You're like, all right, I'm like, well, all right, pump me
All
brakes,
right,
bro.
listen, it's
All right.
not that they're all the same, but
Calm down.
there's a lot of stuff that's
Calm down. And it probably is your church.
and it probably is. But yeah, man, it's tough. It's tricky because internalizing that judgment, especially with something like a double standard, is the worst. Like there's times, and really, and I think we've talked about this in private, where there's a lot of opportunities I said no to because I was like, oh, what are they going to think, or what are they going to say? And there's opportunities and stuff that I just didn't go through with or do, or because I didn't want to be perceived incorrectly, or I was so worried about the judgment.
Yeah.
And like, I'll put it out there for myself. I'll put it out there. Like, I didn't continue. Like, I dropped out of school so I could continue serving in church. Like, I didn't finish my degree. I didn't finish anything. And now my two best friends who now have multiple masters are like, man, you could have just finished, because now I'm on the other side of ministry and it didn't work out for me.
Right.
Like, you know, I got fired and I left the church twice. And I say the church not as in the whole, as the ministry that I was serving in.
Right.
Like, I got fired and then I left because I moved and all that stuff. And I don't have anything to show for it.
And that's the thing that sucks too is, well, I mean, I'm not saying it sucks, but I'm saying, like, I think in your situation, it was a good thing.
Yeah.
Like now, because you're coming around to it. So I think
But
it's
sucks
good.
it sucks that it's a good thing.
But
Like,
but I think other people, if it wasn't you, I think someone else went through that same thing. They would just see like, oh, okay, so God just not about me because I did all this for him.
Yeah.
Technically. And he's not for me. So
people
have issues with that.
And that's kind of what I want to get into in that double standard thing too, because the double standards, once it's internalized and it becomes part of your mindset, it will affect it'll affect things that should be good for you.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
For example, I know people who are so committed to their particular ministry, and they're committed so much that they're not making wise decisions for their family because they think that they'll be betraying God, or that they'll be betraying the church, or they'll be whatever they're afraid of being judged for. They're not making this good decision, so they're losing things like, I mean, just real things, like they're losing their cars, they're losing opportunities at their job to further their livelihood. They're losing opportunities to do certain things, or they're intentionally ignoring parts of their family so they can do what they think is right. And it's like, you need to figure out a way to take a step back and figure out if this is for you, if this is the right decision, because I went through that process. Like, there's no reason why you should be out here working on the thing when your son is in another part of the country, whatever, and you should go be with him, like things like that. Like, these are real situations. These are real double, like, and that's the thing. Like, I never understood that double standard, because it's like, if, for example, if I'm your ministry leader and I know you're out here doing my directive or whatever it is, and I know you have to ignore time from your son, I'm like, I don't think I'd be okay with that.
No.
You know what I mean? Like it's different things like that. It's like, if I know, like, say, for example, if I know you're over here working on my stuff and your family or your son or your kids are in a different part of the country, but you have to be over here next to me while I'm with my family.
Yeah.
How does that work?
Well, this is just a bad boss.
You know? And it's just like, I wouldn't be okay with that. And it's just like, how do you figure out that double standard? Because now you're just like, oh, well, that's not a good thing. And it's like, okay, but now I'm paying you to be here.
Yeah.
And it's like, so what part is the gig? But then if I'm gigging while you're enforcing the faith part, and that's where that double standard comes in. And that's why it's so damaging. And then that's kind of what I'm kind of getting to. And the other thing is, like, it's exhausting that we're being forced to live up to a standard that you yourself won't live by. And then it's just like this weird thing that gets on my nerves when people throw it in their face. And because then they'll be on the same stage like, look at my family, look how good we are. And then you have people that are suffering underneath you, and you're just like, oh, dude, that doesn't look good.
Yeah. Well, that's like the backstage kind of.
Yeah.
And then
it's
behind the curtains kind of.
Yeah,
thing.
and it's funny because
the
like,
BTS.
I was like, what is it? It's like, what's in the dark gets revealed in the light. I forget how that verse goes.
Yeah,
Whatever you do in the dark is shown in the light.
Yeah. Cat Williams.
Cat Williams. But that kind of takes me, not Cat Williams, but that takes me to the next part of there's a reason why all this stuff or talking about this stuff matters.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because, excuse me, living these double standards, doing these double standards leaves people feeling like they're not enough.
Yeah.
Like they'll never be enough.
Yeah.
You know, and we've talked about it before. And because I think about me and my brother. Me and my brother, we grew up in ministry, and my brother and I were from a very young. I mean, my grandfather was an apostle. He was a pastor. He had his huge ministry. My parents were pastors, and so we grew up like it was just even the little things like we used to have food at the end of service. Like the ladies in the back would make food after you have church service. You would go, and then everybody would eat.
Mm-hmm.
Right after church in the same building, we would. If you're familiar with the Latino churches actividades, which translates to activities in the back. So basically, what it would be is like you have food. The ladies would heat up food, and you pay like your $2, your $3, whatever, and you get your food. But I was going somewhere with that, and my mind went blank. Oh, it's that thing of like when we would go eat, my parents and my grandfather were always like, make sure everybody gets a plate first. Make sure everybody else eats first. Whatever is left over, you can have. Mm-hmm. But make sure everybody else eats first.
Yeah.
So it was programmed into us to be a servant so much that we never felt like we had the right to make decisions ever.
Mm.
So it carried over into our adult life, where we're just giving everything away and we don't know how to have autonomy.
Yeah.
And that's that thing where we never feel like enough because we don't deserve anything.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And it was just like one of those things that became ingrained. And it's one of those things that like I'm still learning how to deal with. And me being raised and feeling like that, it's so wild to me. And that's not even just me being raised. It's just like I have the servant attitude. What I'll give everything that I have, and whatever is given to me is what's given to me because that's what's promised to me. Mm-hmm. And then on the other side of that, growing up in that leadership position and seeing other like pastors, ministers that would just take advantage of all that stuff.
Yeah.
I was just like, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
Like if I give everything that I have and God will supply the rest, how come you're buying like 3 cars and have like 16 side chicks?
So like I wrote down this note, and one of the things that stood out was like I wrote down, it was like there's no discipline in church.
Right.
And then there's no discipline in church for like the higher ups, like pastors,
like no one to
decision makers and stuff like they go unchecked.
Right.
And it's,
for the most part, it depends. I mean, it depends on the size of the ministry, but even smaller ministries don't.
Yeah, because it's like, this is my church, this is what I did, and it's like
there's no regulation.
Yeah, there's no regulation or anything.
To,
So you're like, okay, so you just got a private jet now, like right?
Yeah.
And you're just like, why do you have that? And then so a lot of things go unchecked, and I think that's an issue. That's
and the thing even on varying levels of ministry, there's to a certain point in ministry that you get where you have to do everything correctly,
right?
Even within like the system of the United States, there's like tax stuff you have to make sure you're doing correctly.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of it's we know of many stories of where that stuff is exploited, but it's to a point where the money can get so big where the government's like, hey man, what's going on?
Yeah,
And then that it sucks because then that's where those double standards kind of get filtered in.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, I'm making these moves because we have to spend this money,
right,
or I have to have this thing for tax
I need
reasons.
this rolls because
like I once had someone tell me that there was so much money that they had to buy a G-Wagon for tax purposes.
That's crazy.
And I'm like, that makes sense if you're a multimillionaire business owner that owns like car washes or
Yeah,
something.
yeah,
But
yeah,
this
yeah.
is church, my guy.
Church. Yeah, you're
You
not
know,
even paying
and
taxes.
so there's a lot of. I mean, I don't know enough about taxes or money, or I'm sure that's true on some level because there's a lot of people that have done it. But I'm just like, there's a double standard in that of
It was
just like,
literally why you you make a church so you don't have to pay taxes. So that's a scam in itself. Like people that people do. And
Yeah,
it's
you know
just
who
crazy.
you are. I know you, sir, ma'am, lady. Yeah.
So it's crazy. So yeah, I mean, honestly, it's like, well, why spend that much money on the G-Wagon that you don't need,
Yeah.
or just give that money back to the community, or like,
Yeah.
or
and
your
see,
members, like buy them 5 different like Camrys or
yeah,
something like
dude,
that. Like, well, what?
tax donations.
Yeah, you don't need a
like,
G-Wagon, bro.
Donations are write-offs too.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. But
crazy.
and that's that thing of going back to that double standard, like just what we're talking about in general is it's a double standard because that double standard is not just churches. It can be anybody in your life, and it's just like when you like, for example, I took on a mentor that had a double standard because he was always like, you need to make sure you're doing this and giving your best and giving your all, doing certain things and doing this, but I'll let you handle that. You can do my workload too. And I'm just like, so what's the standard here? Are you leading from the front or watching from the back? Like there's a double standard here. And it's just like, it's hard to tell because when you take on mentors and when you take on people that will better your life or like even just bosses that they try to quote unquote under the guise of making you a better person, they ask things of you that they're not in touch with. Like they don't have any concept or perception of what it actually takes.
Yeah.
So in their mind, their math is different than yours, and they're asking you to do things that you can't do. You're like, I can't do this. It's like, no, you have to do it because you're in position to do it. And if you don't do it, you're failing this expectation. You're like, okay, but you don't understand how much this actually takes.
Right.
And that is that double standard of just like, I need you, it's your mandate to do X amount of things. And if you don't, you're failing. You're like, okay, cool. I can't do that with the resources that I have. I can't do that with the tools that I have. Like if you want this amount done, I'm going to need this amount of resources.
Yeah.
And they're just like, nah, you got to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And that's that thing of just like the weight of that judgment is almost too heavy to carry. And I know, and I've been in that situation where I'm just like, I'm not going to get this right. So I don't feel good. I want to say that's correct. Because there's been times in my life where I'm like, I know I'm not going to hit the mark. So if I'm going to fail, I'm just going to go all out because I'm still going to fail anyway.
Yeah.
So if I don't feel good missing the mark, I'm just going to feel good failing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that whole thing of, for me in my personal life, I indulge in the failure because I'm like, well, if I fail, I'm going to try to do things that feel good while I fail, because at least if I'm going to have to go through this anyway, I'll try to get some peace in the failure.
Yeah.
And that's the wrong attitude to have.
Yeah, because you're feeding the flesh. Kind of
You're
thing.
feeding the flesh, and it's just like once you start programming your mind that you get an endorphin rush from failing, you're just going to be predisposed to fail all the time.
Yeah.
Because you're like, I'm never going to do good. And I think that's my main issue with double standards.
Right.
Because it's just like, well, I was like, what did you expect anyway? Like the phrase I don't like is like, oh, if I did this good when, what was it? Oh, if this came out this good, imagine what I could do if I did it all the way. And you're just like, oh my God, that's such a double standard, like backwards thinking to do.
Yeah.
And it's so damaging. And that's the thing, like, it's not just people of faith. It's rampant in the church. And it's rampant in leadership. And it's rampant, but it's just like, this applies to everybody.
Yeah, no, it definitely does.
And I always think about, I think, what is it, James? Oh, there it is. James 1:8 is like such a person is double-minded and unstable in all that they do.
Yep.
And it's just like, when you're double-minded, it's a bad look. It's damaging to faith.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take like a theology major or like a therapist or like someone well advanced to see the lies. Like if you're doing one thing and you're doing another, it's just like, come on, son. Like, I can see what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then this whole thing's a joke. Like, you want me to live like this, but like I know of ministry leaders that from the pulpit that were like, I praise the Lord, I don't smoke weed no more, or I don't do the drugs. And they've approached quote unquote unsavory people in the church to see if they cook them up.
Oh wow.
And you're just like, come on, bro, that's a bad look.
Yeah. Now you just lying.
Like, you're just straight up. Like,
now you just lying.
You're just lying. And it's like, I'm not lying. All our I don't know why he's a Southern.
Yeah.
Like, all my battles.
Why?
All my
they're always
battles
Southern.
are my own.
They're always Southern.
But I didn't mean to cut you off. Where did you go? Where were you
No, I wasn't going anywhere. Yeah, I
It's that
wasn't going.
double-mindedness, dude.
Yeah. It's Southern pastors. I don't know what it is, but
but it's just talking about that double-mindedness brings instability. That double standard does bring instability. People aren't going to trust stuff that's unstable.
no. But another thing is that I mean, we are here in the flesh too. So like, we have fleshly desires and things like that. So, and depending on how you grew up, like those things are just like, oh, that it's cool to do that. In reality, it's not. And then you get into your faith, and then you find out it's not good.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So then now you're fighting it, you know, and then you become double-minded because you're used to this thing already.
Yeah.
And then now you got to switch over here because now all these other Christians are staring at you saying that you're doing, like, judging you, saying that you're doing the completely wrong thing. And it's just one of those things that I think we as Christians fight with. And also, obviously, pastors are people and leaders, you know, so they're struggling with the same thing. It just sucks that it's under the umbrella of God, and then that's where it becomes a problem. Yeah,
and to kind of talk about the opposing argument of what I'm talking about, kind of going on the other end, is it's easy to interpret what I'm saying as, oh, the churches should be perfect if they want us to be perfect. That's not necessarily what I'm saying.
Right.
What I'm saying is see it for what it is, because the other side of that argument is what you just said. Oh, I'm a human as well. I'm allowed to fail.
Yeah.
I'm still a human person on earth.
Yeah.
That's allowed to have my own struggles and have my own. Yes, you're fallible, and there's no pastor, there's no minister, there's no anybody in the faith that is absolutely perfect.
Right.
No one is. It's literally impossible. There isn't a way for anybody to be perfect. And yes, you are allowed to fail. You are allowed to. What I'm talking about is continuing to abuse that double standard.
Yeah.
And you're not making strides to be a better person.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, you're not asking for forgiveness. You're not humbling yourself. You're just assuming that everything you're doing is the right thing to do, and you're doing it in such a braggadocious way that you're shaming people.
You know what I thought about when you mentioned this topic to me? It reminded me of Joel Osteen in that church, and then how big that church was, and what was it? Was that Katrina? He wasn't allowing them to come in.
I don't remember. I think was it Katrina? It was one of the hurricanes. No, it was one of the hurricanes. I don't think it was Katrina.
It was okay, but it was
a huge hurricane.
Yeah, it was one of the hurricanes, and he's like, nah.
His church is where in Houston, no, something like that.
Yeah, it's in Houston, dude.
I think it was that hurricane that hit Texas or hit Houston.
It said 45,000 people. And my man was like, nah, not in the Lord's church. And you're like, bro, like that's insane. That's insane to me.
Yeah.
So to me, that would be a double standard.
There's a lot of double standards.
Because you want people to come into your doors.
Well, you want people to come into the doors.
Oh, capacity
you want people to
16,
trust you.
Sorry,
like
16,000.
you want people to trust you, and it's like you reach out to people you trust in time of need.
Yeah.
I can't think of a bigger need than a hurricane. I mean, even right now, California is experiencing huge fires.
Yeah.
And it's like there's people that are losing homes, and they're displaced.
Any churches opening up about
I have
that?
No idea. Maybe
that is crazy.
Because I know there's a lot of food banks and there's a lot of stuff that are opening up, and there's a lot of shelters and schools that are being opened for disaster relief. But it's that whole thing of just like there's that double standard, man. Like if you want to be a pillar in the community, you should.
But these are like expensive homes too that are that are going down. So like,
well, there's a lot of homes that are
that's true.
It's a little bit of everybody.
I just wondering, like, people. Just,
I ain't feeling bad for the rich.
Right? Just not even your first home. It's just second or third home.
Like, oh man, your beach home.
Dang.
But nah, I mean, shout out to everybody going through the fires and stuff. It's crazy, dude. I've been watching it and just kind of like a lot of my favorite creators and people and like people that I know that live in LA are just like, man, we don't know what we're gonna do.
But the whole thing is weird because like there are people getting caught lighting fires.
Yeah,
and
dude.
It's like, what are you doing, man?
I don't.
Anyway,
I think part of it is just like a lot of those people lighting those real quick. I know the audio's still running. It's telling me that the SD card is full. I thought I formatted when we started. So on the GoPro. So continuing on before the cards ran out of memory. We were just kind of discussing the double standard thing of the whole thing of the counter argument to this is that a lot of people will be like, oh, well, you know, I'm also human. I should be extended grace. I'm doing this for X and X reason. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's totally fine. That we understand that because we're humans ourselves. Mm-hmm. But the whole thing is the continuous abusing of this double standard so you can gain more is the bad part.
Yeah,
and that's when we're talking about and we've talked about it in great length privately. It's just like that's probably the damaging part for me because a lot of that judgment and that double standard just has been internalized to the point where I don't think I'm allowed to do anything, or if I do the thing, it'll look bad. Mm-hmm. And kind of going back to what we talked about earlier in this episode of just like I internalized that double standard negatively so much that it's what caused me to drop out of school so I can continue to serve in church. Mm-hmm. And it's not just blatantly. There's a lot that went into that because I thought the right thing, my misguided self thought that the right thing would be for me to, if I dropped out or didn't continue my education, that the right thing for me was to support ministry and do ministry. Mm-hmm. Come to find out, the double standard was that on the other side of these things, I wasn't going to be rewarded. And now for the first time in my life, I have to reset everything and fight my way out, which is fine because there's a lot of people I know that don't ever get to do that.
Yeah.
You know, like and that's part of one of the bigger reasons for me of starting like this podcast and starting these conversations to talk about these things of just like, hey man, you don't have to do that. You're also not crazy if you feel that way. It's okay to struggle with your faith.
Well, that's one of the things that they don't mention. It's funny, growing up as a Christian, it's one of the things that they don't mention ever is that you're going to struggle.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to struggle hard and it's not easy. And then people make it seem like, oh, because you found God and God does this, God does that. But it's like, no, like I get it. But it's still hard because of fleshly things, you know, that you struggle with that we thought was normal. Yeah. And you're like, oh, okay, we can't be doing this. We all
thought was normal.
Yeah, we can't be doing this. You know what I'm saying? And it's crazy. It even comes to the point where like, because we're car guys, I feel like me wanting a car sometimes, or like, man, I really like that car. I kind of want that car.
Yeah.
Like competes against my faith.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Because it's a flesh thing. But I'm like, dude, I'm only here one time, man. Can I not want that car?
And I think an episode we needed that I want to talk about, a topic I want to talk about in an episode is the cultural implications of faith sometimes.
Yeah.
Because what is it's like almost everybody cites the whole thing. Oh, you want to be in the world? It's all about the cars, houses, and the flashy jewelry. You're like, no, I'm a car guy. I like that car.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like a lot of these cultural implications of like, you're crooked if you want to dress nice and have a cool car.
So you know what's funny?
You're a bad person.
You know what's funny? I probably can speak to 90% of the black community that the reason because we wear Jordans is because we got made fun of it at one point in time.
Yeah.
So you don't want to get made fun of. So it's honestly it's bullying.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
dude, I got made fun of because I had some LA Gears on, which are fly, by the way.
LA Gears are hard.
Yeah.
Even for Latinos, LA Gears hard.
Was hard, but they were like, "Oh, you ain't got no Nikes on, you ain't got no Jordans, whatever." So I'm spending all this money now trying to keep up with the Joneses, which is hilarious. But trying to do that shit, and
It's the same thing
it's
for
the same thing.
black and brown
Yeah.
culture, because I know for for me, it's interesting that Polo Club is coming up. Polo Club for the longest time was like very cheap T-shirts. It's like it's like Champion, like how Champion used to be like cheap. Oh, you were or Starter back in the day. Remember that?
Yeah.
Starter caps were just like cheap hats.
It was.
And like Champion was cheap hoodies and cheap
Yeah.
sweatpants, and now they're like $90 for a hoodie. You're like, I'm not gonna pay that, dude.
Yeah.
Like,
So why you got to start a hat? Like,
So, like-
you need a new era.
yeah,
Like, what are
dude.
you doing?
Yeah. And it's just
yeah.
like I remember that too, because like I know for us, a lot of the cholos were Pro Club because they were cheap shirts, and I used to buy Pro Clubs because I'm a big dude. Pro Club was the only ones that had like 4XL and 4XLT because I had to wear tall, and they were the only guys that had that. So I was buying a lot of Dickies and a lot of Polo
Right.
Club. Or Polo Club, Pro Club. I kept saying Polo Club, Pro Clubs like that.
Oh, okay.
Dickies was like that, and it's like now because everyone wants to keep up because they're cool as hell. Like they're just like, yeah, get you Dickies, and it's just like, I mean, part of it has to do with like rap culture because like Dre and Snoop.
Well, that's
would just
the
pull up
thing.
in
That's
Dickies suits. Like
yeah.
the work shirts with the pants.
Bro, when my brother got back from LA, from Vegas, man, he was all dickied out. I was like, what are you doing?
And man, Dickies is hard.
It is hard, but
like I remember,
but I had to wear it for work. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm a mechanic,
and
bro.
And that's the thing. Like I remember when people used to get made, like a lot of Vato homies that I have. I remember when Cortezes were just perceived as like gang shoes.
Oh, okay.
They're like, yeah, you can't wear Cortez. If you wear Cortez, that means you're a Vato, and you make no money and going straight to prison.
Yeah.
That might be true for some people, but it's like that whole thing was stigmatized.
Yeah.
And then it was wild to me where as soon as
That's like a LA thing there, right?
well, it's an LA like cholo. Well, it's a LA
Because
kinda
boy,
cholo
Kendrick
adjacent thing.
pushes Cortez.
Because it's part of the Nike. It's part. Well, Nike Cortez are part of the culture.
Yeah, it's part of the
And
culture.
I don't know the full history of Cortez, but I know it was for a lot of the cholo community wore Cortezes. Because it was always Cortez and house slippers.
I thought that was their first running shoe. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
I don't know the exact history, but I know it's a very important shoe in the Vato culture, in the Latino culture, Latino and Hispanic like cholo culture.
Yeah.
It was Cortez's long socks and Dickies.
Yeah.
I don't know how much I have to do my research, but I know it's around gang culture. All the cholos and all the vatos I knew growing up all had that. They had the web belts too. The web belts with your initial on it, or you put your gang initial on it.
Oh wow.
We had the Cuban links chains with like your name on it. That whole thing, like I remember, the Cuban chains, like the little really thin ones.
Yeah.
I remember all that, and like now all that's like popular, and they're like, yeah, it's a fashion thing. You're like, no, bro, like stop it.
It's not. Yeah.
And anyway, but that's that whole thing of just like, yeah, it's like I'm gonna buy all the stuff I'm into now that I got money. That's one thing.
We should do a thing on gang culture that's related to like, because technically it's like a
And they go
cult.
side by side. They go
It's side by side, and it's like a cult.
Bro,
and it's
no, for
wild.
real. Like I would love to talk about gang culture.
Yeah,
Some of the
yeah.
best people I've ever met come from the gang culture.
Yeah.
Some of the worst people I've ever met come from the gang culture.
Yeah.
But it's like it's crazy how some of those practices mirror
make a
like
note.
faith and belief. Because we talked about it too. Like faith, we could. I mean that's kind of related to this because there's also a double standard too. Like when there's sicarios, like hitmen in Mexico.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We
like,
talk about that.
Yeah,
a
we
lot.
talked about that. Like
Yeah.
sicarios, hitmen in Mexico, where they'll pray, Dios protéjame, que nadie me mate.
Yeah.
Like, God protect me.
Yeah.
So I will be safe and protect my family as I'm gonna go out here and murder all these people right quick. double standard.
Double standard.
Double standard. You know, it's like it's to the point where but I think that and we'll talk about it later. It's just that cultural belief. It's like part of the culture where you go to like church. Like I know, bro, double standard. I know drug dealers that tithe.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
like,
so even we were talking about that with the mob because they're straight like Catholics, and so like they would be in church every week.
Yeah, dude.
And they will go catch a body the next day.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
They'll
So
go to
like,
church with bodies in the trunk.
Crazy.
Ooh, that would be a hard like album name. Going to church with bodies in the trunk.
That's shut up.
Hard. Hard. That's hard. Hard rappers that watch this podcast. Make that right now.
Hard rappers
that
believe in God.
That believe in the Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ.
Oh my God. We love you, God. Bodies in the trunk. We love you, God.
Bodies in the trunk, God.
So does that mean there's a shield of faith and the Glock of truth?
Shut up.
The sword, the Glock of the spirit.
Shut up.
Anyway,
shut up.
Double standards.
So here's a clip that I wanted to show you, and let me see what you think about it because
I saw you start to wrestle online.
So
And you was
Lecrae with
"All right,
B.
y'all,
Simone.
I'm finna be celibate. I'm finna be sober. I'm just wondering, like, what happened? Were you at a place where you're like, man, I could love Jesus and be in the streets, or did something happen where you was like, nah, I gotta
relationship.
Oh.
Because people think when you give your life to Christ, all right, now you talked about the Lord, you still cussing. Give me a second. I've been cussing for 25 years and I've known Jesus for 10 months.
Yeah.
All I have to do is keep my eyes on him.
Right.
And he will convict me and start to slowly purify my heart. My relationship with God is not horizontal. I'm not worried about y'all. I got my eyes on him. And the more I walk with him, things just start to shed off. I don't even want to have sex no more. I don't even have the appetite for liquor no more. But if you don't go to him first and you start saying, okay, I got baptized yesterday. I can't do the drugs no more. I can't have the sex no more. You're going to go back to it anyway because your heart wasn't changed.
Yeah, that's facts. Right?
Facts. Yeah.
And that ties into the double standard of just like people dealing with fleshly things and then trying to come to Christ, and it's just
it's true. My favorite sounds weird. I don't know. It feels weird that I'm saying it, but my favorite public faith struggle that I think about a lot, truthfully, is DMX.
Oh yeah. Oh,
DMX,
dude, my man was preaching in his concerts, bro.
I think about that a lot because I'm like, man, he was
definitely feeling some pain,
dude.
He was definitely feeling some pain.
Fuck these dudes. Like, yeah, I'm like, he's just one of those guys that like it's true when I say I identify with DMX's faith struggle more than I identified with my pastor's faith struggle. In a lot of ways, not 100%. In a lot of ways, because he was always like, "Man, I'm trying, and I'm visibly trying, and this thing is a problem for me."
That's crazy because I look back at it, being me, music guy. I never got into DMX. Like, I never owned the album, nothing. Like, I just didn't like him. I like, he wasn't spitting to me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I'm just like, and I get it. But he probably spit to a bunch of people that were struggling, but so just not me.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's funny because me, as a kid who grew up in different parts of the United States, as a Latino, like I was a Latino who did most of my growing up in suburbs of Colorado and in the Southwest in El Paso. Like, I got a lot of different tastes, and it's like, it's not that he made music for me specifically, but he impacted me because
but when you mentioned it, and then I'm looking back at it, I'm like, you right on,
and that's part of the reason why I think about like a lot of those things, and even releasing stuff like this. We don't know who we're going to impact, dude.
No,
like,
not
I
at
think
all.
about my cousins. I think about like my brother. I think about him, and I think about, just like, because no one's talking about stuff that I felt, and I found out there's a lot of people that feel like me. Just like you feel like I do in a lot of ways, I feel like you do in a lot of ways, and I was like, dude, no one's talking about this stuff. No one's talking about this double standard in a constructive way,
right?
Because it's easy to jump and be like, I hate the church, and it's like, nah, man, it's not that we hate the church, it's not that we hate God, we love God. Like B. Simone said, my relationship isn't horizontal.
But even I like that she pointed out that people are like, why are you still cussing? Like, that's such a Christian thing to say. And you're like, You're yeah, like, but like she said, I've been doing this for so long.
It's
You
like,
know what
why
I'm
you
saying?
cussing? What else am I supposed to say when I stub my toe, bro?
Right. And it's one of those things. It's like, yeah, you just can't be perfect right off the bat.
You can't.
You know what I'm saying?
It's
And
impossible.
And then the wild thing is like, God knows you're not going to be perfect. So it's like, yeah, it's cool to shoot for that.
God knows. God
but
knows
you're not going to be
it's-
perfect, bro.
God knows it's so impossible for you to be perfect that He sent His only Son.
Right. Jesus Christ.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And it's like people forget that the basics, blood. Like these are the basics, fool. Like
Right. Yeah.
die for your sins.
For your sins, because He knows you're not going to be perfect.
But also saying shit when I stub my toe isn't going to send me to hell.
True.
That's a different podcast episode.
That is a different podcast.
But
There
I
are
do want to
different
say
types of sins.
I want to talk about how do we fix this? Now, again, we don't have all the answers. We're trying to figure this out. But how do we fix this?
So before that, there's another clip I want to show you, and it's the Joe Rogan podcast with Wes Huff.
I need to watch this whole thing.
Dude, it's so good. Like, and then Wes Huff does a great job by just sharing the gospel to Joe in a great way. But this is part of the part. I forget this guy's name, but anyway, so he's playing a clip of a clip, but we're trying to figure that out. So anyway.
These other groups of Jews during his day. So we talked about the Essenes, who actually aren't mentioned in the Bible, but there are other groups like the Pharisees, who are like lay scholars, and the Sadducees, who are professional priest scholars. And he's constantly critiquing the fact that they have this hypocritical religiosity to them, where they're doing things like tithing their mint leaves, like to make sure that they get all of. This is where we get the idea of the letter of the law versus the intention of the law. Like Jesus critiques them for that because he says, you're trying to do everything right and you're missing the point.
Yeah.
So
Isn't that right? That's
one of the things he
crazy.
says is like, if your donkey falls in a ravine on the Sabbath, do you pull it out? Or is that work? Like, what's the point of the Sabbath? Is it to not do any work? Like, is it to make sure that you're not working too hard because you might be breaking the Sabbath? Or like, what is the point? He says, like, the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And that there's this intention. This is the whole Sermon on the Mount.
Sermon
Matthew
on the
chapter
Mount.
5.
Yeah.
Is he keeps saying, you have heard it said, but I say. And he refers to the Mosaic law. And it looks like he's critiquing the Mosaic.
Yeah, and I want to say really quick on this point. A lot of people say, "Oh, there you go, Jesus is a progressive Christian."
That kind of because that's it reminds me of the when he's talking about the what is it in Luke, the Pharisee and the tax collector.
Yeah.
I think we talked about it before, and I just forgot to go over it. But the Pharisee and the tax collector, basically, they're talking about it's the parable of where the tax
Luke
collector,
18.
yeah, where he's just like, yeah, man, look at all the stuff I'm doing. And
Right.
I know the tax collector's like, man, God, I'm just trying to do right. Forgive me. And he's humble about it.
Right.
And then the Pharisee's like, look at all the stuff I'm doing.
Yeah.
Look at my J's. Look at my car. I got it
Yeah.
because of you. I think he didn't say that.
Yeah.
It's the whole thing where he's just like, look how much I'm tithing. Look how much I'm doing out here.
Right.
And it's just like, nah, he's humble and he's doing the right thing. Like you're technically correct. Like you're right in the most wrong way.
And that's where it comes down to when we talk about the double standard, especially the double standard in like pastors and stuff like that, because you're doing the right thing, but then your mind is somewhere else because you're worried about all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And then even like, what Wes Huff was saying, it's like, you're not getting the point.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
So
And
it's like tithing with side chicks,
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah.
Like
you're not getting the point.
I just got to be in the shirt.
and
Tithing
this-
with side chicks. That would be a hard album.
What is up with you in this trash? like these trash concepts he's trying to brush on me, man. Like, oh, get this thing out of here. It's terrible. But but yeah. So
No, that double standard, and this is why, like I said earlier in the episode, it's damaging to the faith. Like how
Yeah.
it's hard.
it's part of church hurt.
Dude, it's all this is all connected.
It is all connected.
And it's that whole thing of like, how do you tell someone Jesus Christ, God saved my life, and you're just like, oh, you mean that faith where deacons are getting young girls pregnant? Oh, you mean that faith where people are getting cheated out of millions because this person who's broke is tithing?
Yeah.
They got 50 cents in their bank account, and they just tithed their last $110 because they thought that's what they had to do by the church.
Right.
But they're living check to check, and the kids ain't got no food.
So,
you know what I mean? Like,
not well, I don't know. What was the opposite? You said a devil's advocate.
oh, just the opposing side of the
The
argument.
opposing side. So the
'Cause
opposing
we don't
side.
glorify the devil in this podcast.
Not one bit. No. So the opposing side would be because these people are in leadership, because these people are like ahead of these churches or whatever, that they get smacked with like crazy
battles.
harder battles in spiritual warfare that they just can't beat it, off the bat. But then I guess that
And that's true.
that's like with their faith kind of thing. But it's still, I would say for Satan, that would be like a weak point. That would be like, this dude likes chicks. Let's
Put chicks around it.
boom.
Yeah.
But then you get into like, the witches doing all that kind of crazy stuff,
and then
bringing it into
there's another side
the
to
church.
that. Yes, as a singular focal point of a leader is fallible. That's why you need a group of leaders around you.
Yeah.
Because where I might struggle with
Even
women,
Jesus had disciples, man.
Yeah.
He had a bunch of people around him.
right, and that's the whole thing. Like where I'm flawed, you could pick up the slack at if you're together in one whole unit. But that's the difference between the community and the cult.
Yeah.
A community is like we're all links in this chain, and we're all doing our best. We're all doing our best to hold it together.
Right.
A cult is everything I say you got to do.
Yeah, and it's a singular
And
person that you're
that's
following.
The difference. That's the difference.
Yeah.
It's
That's why I hate prophets.
and that's
Because
the
prophets to me are just, I'll say bullshit, fake prophets.
fake prophets. for
Yeah,
sure.
fake prophets. But they are like the beginning of cult leaders or just cult leaders. I hate them.
And that's very true. And so, kind of like how I want to wrap this up because we got a little bit of time left.
Yep.
How I want to wrap this up is think about how we break the cycle. First, we got to admit that the church, the system of when this system is broken, and I call it a system very intentionally because when I say the church, I'm talking about the infrastructure placed around to serve the people in the church. Like the man-made infrastructure of church, not the faith.
Yeah.
Not believing in Christ, not your relationship with God.
Right.
That's the whole point. We have to admit that the church is flawed, but like really flawed.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean God is flawed.
No.
Because the whole point is the main thing that we want to say is how do you get around that is by trusting God, not the system. The
Test
system
all
is
spirits.
not made for you.
Test all spirits.
Yeah. The system isn't made for you. The system is made to serve people.
Yeah.
And if you trust people, it's going to fail every time. Faith doesn't have to look like this toxic perfectionism that is sold to us. I think that's the whole thing. Like in the Bible talks about how no one is perfect. So how do you expect to be perfect? Like it's the basics, basic things, basics. No one's perfect, said God. How do you expect to be perfect? Pastors
You
can't
literally
be
start
perfect, managers can't be
with
perfect.
Adam and Eve being perfect and then them becoming not perfect,
Right.
in the grand scheme of
Like
things.
off rip, we
Yeah.
can't be perfect. Period.
Yeah, at all.
We can't. As soon as you understand,
We're going to be
that-
fighting with that forever.
Yeah,
Yeah,
as soon as you
Until he
understand,
comes
like until he comes back. But that's the whole point, man. Like that's the
Yeah.
whole point. If you understand that basic principle and you try to keep it in your mind at all times, you will not fall into the cult.
Yeah.
You will not fall into keeping up with the Jones. And that's the thing. Like that's the thing. Like it's gotten to the point where we're not keeping up with the Joneses anymore. We're trying to keep up with the pastors,
Right.
and we shouldn't do that.
Not at all. Especially the glorified ones. Or not glorified ones, but the
The predatorial ones.
yeah. Well, them
crazy.
too. But yeah, just
That's crazy.
man, I don't know. Why do you have to have 6 houses and a Lambo and in a private jet? Who you speaking to? Who are you speaking to?
Right.
You got a spaceship?
Yeah.
You're like,
You got a
who are you speaking to?
You got a
Like,
SpaceX. Yeah,
like,
anyway.
bro, get out of here.
To tie it to some word, because I do want to tie it to word. James 4:8 talks about, come near to God and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. And that's the whole thing. Like, we're not saying end all churches, we're saying getting closer to God. Churches are good. Some of my best experiences come from church.
And also, when I hear the double-minded thing, to me, I take it as, if you want to be with me, be with me.
Yeah.
That's like messing with a chick or something like that, and you just keep.
What are we?
Yeah. I mean, we something.
Yeah, be something with God.
Yeah, and it's just it's just bad communication.
Yeah, dude. And this is a call for everyone. Lead it. This is a call for everyone, leaders included. Take responsibility for your own mess instead of pointing fingers at everybody else.
Facts.
My question, and we'll end with this. Close. We'll end with this. What if we stopped worrying about what if we stopped worrying about who looks the holiest and just focused on being honest with God? What would church look like if grace was the first move?
Ooh. Yeah.
That's my question.
Yeah.
So, my thing for you to think about, and what I've been thinking about,
I dig it.
is pay attention. Notice where the double standards show up, whether it be in church, your relationships, or even double standards with yourself.
Discern it.
And instead of being mad about it or upset about it or betrayed by it, do something different. Extend grace, or what I've been doing is be real about it. Ask God about it and ask him to help you see things clearly.
Yeah. And that's the thing that a lot of people don't remember to do. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh man, Father, like this church is acting crazy.
Yeah.
It's like, go to God.
Yeah.
Ask God.
Don't
like,
hate.
Yeah.
Show grace.
Yeah. Also, go to those people that are acting crazy, but call them out. But
one of those things we got to talk about too. It's just that community side of things. Be your brother's keeper.
Yeah.
Just be like, hey man, you're acting wild right now.
Wild. No church in the wild.
Copyright. So think about that next time you think about double standards. I want to end by saying, if this episode hit home for you, jump in the comments.
Boom.
If it hit home for you, send it to somebody, message it to somebody. Jump in the comments, DM us. Tell us about your story, your experience with this.
Send it to that pastor that's sus.
Send it to that sus pastor.
All right.
That sus minister.
Yeah. We're talking about you.
We're talking about you, cuz. But for real, let's keep this conversation going.
Yeah, let's keep it going.
Let's keep it going because
this is great.
this is too big. This has held me back personally for a long time. This is too big to be silent about. Remember.
The 5th of November.
remember the 5th of November, gunpowder kegs.
You like that? No.
Yeah, okay. Bars. Remember this: God's love isn't based on how perfect you are or how well you follow the church's rules. You're already enough. That's the whole point. You're already enough. So let's figure it out together.
Dig it.
Hit the outro. We'll catch you in the next one. Peace.